So Nader, how are you?
Uh, this is a very tough question to answer these days, but doing all right. Given the circumstances, I don't think I can be better.
That's very good to hear. And you have a new album you've been working
Yeah,
on, so there's some positive things as well.
exactly.
So where I want to start is I don't know a lot about music in Lebanon. Can you kind of paint me a picture of the circumstances under which you fell in love with music?
Oof, I think it's a DNA thing
Mm,
because most of my family, especially from my father's side, they sang these traditional sort of our local blues. When people are in pain, they kind of sing, and there's a style to this called the ataba here
mm,
in Lebanon, and they all sang it, and they all had beautiful voices. Apparently, it's a thing. Uh, well, they never expected to have a rocker out there, but they all sang. So I remember that, and I remember I was always interested in liturgic music, church music,
mm,
and in our case here, it's the Byzantine, Eastern Catholic music that you hear in Greece,
sure.
or Russia, even, or Romania. This kind of musicality. So I think that's what triggered my initial instinct in music.
How did you? Well, quickly about Lebanese blues. Then was it? Can I equate it to kind of the blues from America? Was there? Is there any similarities?
Yes, they're all complaining. That's basically it. That's the basis of it. Yes, they're all complaining, and it's all heart wrenching.
Mm.
Not much into the technique of it, more into the power and wordplay, and really, it's just I love you, you don't love me. What do we do? It's as basic as this. I woke up this morning, my baby was gone. Half of blues
Simple,
songs are like that.
simple but powerful in a way.
Yeah, you know, they always give you the problem, and then there's the all right, now what? You know.
No, because I find that interesting because you fell into the blues after a while, and I think you even went over to America, right? Didn't you
Oh
go?
yeah, yeah. That was at a later stage. I first fell in love with the '60s rock and roll that was going on in the America and the whole culture around it. The
Sure.
beatniks, from the literature to the music and the whole '69 revolution, '68 revolution. And it was through the Doors and Hendrix and Canned Heat and all these blues
Mm,
rock sort of cats that I went into the blues.
mm,
And that's where I discovered the whole world of agony and pain and legends, where the devil will give you everything, but then he'll take it away in a second. And, all these Robert Johnson sort of
sure.
legends.
But
But then
for
we
you,
had to visit the
oh, good.
States, indeed. I mean, they took us to the States to meet our blues heroes, but there was a surprise there. I'll let you ask me about it.
Okay. Well, what happened? Because I believe you were a big fan of R.L. Burnside, if I'm not mistaken. Those types of kind of very original blues players. What was the big surprise then when you ended up in the States?
This is a double question. At first, I was in love with the Chicago blues because that's the
Mm,
first
okay,
thing you get into. So it's very electric. It was the Buddy Guys of
right.
the world. It was I don't know. I loved Albert Collins, that Telecaster
It's
sound. With
one
that,
of my favorite guitar players.
right, right.
Master
This
of the
thing
Telecaster. I love him.
exactly, and not even all of it. Just this much of the Telecaster. That's how much neck he had.
Yeah,
Uh,
he put a capo on, right, and just played
yeah,
it.
he just had
Amazing.
this much and no teeth. And then you had your Albert Kings and you had your,
Mm,
all these cats. That was the first touch of the blues that I had. Then, when I started going into the harmonica, because that was what I played mostly, I played a
okay.
little guitar. I wasn't that good. I'm still not that good. Uh, but I just look good with a guitar. But the harmonica took me back and I started with James Cotton and Junie Wells, and then they threw me back to older stuff. And that's where I went into the Muddy Waters and the Little Walter who came with it. And when you get to Muddy Waters, he's the guy who connected the rural music
Mm,
of the Mississippi to the electric. He made
yeah.
things electric. So when you listen to Muddy Waters back in Mississippi, that's when you open up to a whole world of unplugged and of unplugged old stuff. But then you're like, okay, what's the equivalent of this unplugged stuff today? And it was R.L. Burnside, Junior Kimbrough, that played this hypnotic music, no chord changes, just one fucking riff going at it, man. It was insane. It was very magical.
But what was then the surprise that you encountered?
Well, it was one night we were playing in front of Leo Welch, who is, and back then he was an 85 years old Fat Possum record artist.
Okay.
Fat Possum is the record label that had RL and all these guys. And it was a big deal to play in front of him, and we were rockers. We were not bluesmen per se, so we were making a lot of noise, but playing nonetheless good blues. We finish and we come down to him and ask him, so what did you think? And he had downed, I think, a good 20 beer cans, man. I like it. It was impressive. And he's like, well, you play our music very well. What about yours? Like, oh, you son of a bitch. Okay. Okay, that's a good question. And that's where it sent me into a whole quest of, all right, we play their music very well, but what about ours?
Is it fair to say then that the new album is kind of an exploration of what that music could be, the kind of the Lebanese, well, basically what comes out of you, the Lebanese rock and roll, or how do you see now this new album in that respect?
I feel like these Asian chefs who cook in front of people.
Sure.
I feel like I'm cooking in front of the crowd. I have no idea what's going to come out. But as long as they see the honesty with which this is being prepared, I think they'll relate to the feeling and to the honesty of it. I don't think about it a lot in terms of genre and styles, but I am a child of the blues at the same time, and I am the child of classical Oriental music, and this is what's coming out in an urban feel, like what a city boy can get from all these rural influences. And it could be a blueprint to what world music. I mean, we're becoming so connected all over the world that I think at some point music will start sounding the same all over the world. I mean, you can listen to my grandfather singing without me knowing it on the internet.
No, it's crazy. The lines are blurring. Like you say, the genres matter less. I mean, everything kind of got elements of everything these days. It feels
like that's healthy. That's healthy.
I think so. But if we take you in particular, then, because obviously you are from Lebanon, you're from Beirut. How did that then influence, in a way, that especially in the, let's say, last 5 years or so, how did that influence the type of music that you've started to make? And especially with Under the Sun, it almost feels, and I think it's described as well, as this a love letter to Beirut, and kind of cherishing where you're from, in a way.
Well, I spent the last maybe 10 years away from Beirut, being on tour, living in Europe most of the times. Paris was the place of choice because I had family there. But then we would tour Europe the whole year, and I would see Beirut maybe one month or 1 month out of the year combined. But I knew that I had an unfinished story with the city. Now, all of this was amplified by how much trouble the city went through these last 5 years, and the introspective work that COVID put us in. So I was locked in the city that I don't recognize anymore, that got blown up to pieces at the same time with one of the biggest explosions in history, and then by one of the biggest economic crises in the world as well. So I found another connection to Beirut, and I found a responsibility towards it, something that I had never found before. I never wanted to represent the Lebanese people or Arabs. I never gave a shit, actually. It was just about rock and roll, sex, drugs, and no, you know how it is.
Sure.
But now, no. I have a place in the history of this country, and I'm claiming it. Whether it's pretentious or not, fuck it. I have a place in the panorama.
It's interesting because you wrote this letter. I think it's kind of like a bio about the album, where you explain certain elements of Lebanese history, and it's interesting when you say, well, I wasn't really involved. I was just focused on rock and roll. When did was it because of kind of all the like you say, the explosion, the economic things? Because if we think about the 60s and 70s, it was quite different over there, wasn't it?
It was fantastic, actually. I mean, from what we're told. Again, we were never there.
Yeah,
The
fair enough.
60s, especially. The 60s, especially. Um, there was some sort of a renaissance in terms of jet setters were always there. You had Marlon Brandos of the world going there for one dinner and then leaving for one party. The Dalidas, all these big cats. And the Lebanese has always been a good caterer to entertainment. We have one of the biggest party scenes in the world, voted.
Okay.
Like in terms of electronic music and even all sorts of club music. Not only EDM, even things that are a little more researched.
Mm.
Um, so we've always been a good welcoming people. Now the civil war started in '75 officially, um, and that changed the whole map of the country, the whole demographic map, and even cultural map. And every now and then, every 10 years, we get a renaissance, and then something happens, brings you back
Mm.
to a bit of a dark ages. It's a cycle, it's cyclical, it's insane, and I've survived four of them,
Wow.
and now yet another one coming. Hopefully not, but we can sense it. I mean, we can. Well, I'm prepared for war. I have my luggage at the door.
I can yeah well I can't imagine actually I was gonna say, but it's yeah, it's crazy to think about, really.
It's just how you feel anxious sometimes, and we can touch on mental health as well
Mm.
because we're all going through these things these days. It's the modern disease.
Mm.
Um, Imagine that anxiousness for days on the same level
I mean,
all the
yeah,
time.
it's yeah, like I said, I can't even imagine. So, well, what I find
It's it's
interesting,
just
and
it's just there, and we got to deal with it. That's our part of the world, and we hope that it doesn't happen. We wish a lot of wishful thinking, but it's not in your hands. It's not in my hands. That's what's that. It's this powerlessness that's so annoying. Like
mm,
I could control so many things in my life, but this,
how do you kind of I don't. How do you stay sane in a way in that sense and keep a positive outlook? Because it's so easy to become bitter with everything, as you say, with those cycles every 10 years, and it's very easy to become cynical. How do you? And especially if I listen to this album, if you listen to some of the songs, there is some optimism and positivity in there, and kind of, hey, we're all one. Everything's gonna be fine. There's that message in there. So how do you keep
I
keep that
mean,
optimism?
yes and no because it's gonna be fine. It's absolutely sarcastic.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah.
it's
No, no. I wrote
it's
down. Where is it? Even God don't care. I wrote down from that song.
yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. No, that's sarcasm. But we are one is real, and it's not even a message of unity. It's the reality of being. I'm going to be slightly spiritual here,
No, that's all right.
so bear with me. I don't think we exist as individuals. There's no you, there's no Robin, there's no Nader. We're all the same life force distributed in different containers. There's one
Mm,
container called Robin, one container called Nader, one container is a tree, another container is a cat, and we're all made of the same life source. Um, Once we understand that we belong to the same matter, it just blurs the limits of individuality. Like we are really one. And when you come to think of it, if you think of karma, for example, when they tell you, if I hurt you, it'll come back and bite me in the ass, it doesn't. The minute I hurt you, I hurt myself because you are
mm,
me and I am you. It's crazy. And at the same time, if you believe in God, we are God. We are the created. That's who we are. We are the creation. Um, so when it comes to that, there is no difference between an Israeli and a Palestinian, except for what life has made them to be indoctrined with.
mm.
But there
No, that,
is fairness and there is unfairness in the world. And it's up to us, people who think differently, to change that or to at least try. If I can get to two Westerners and make them understand the Palestinian pain, I'm happy. and
No,
to make them understand that this did not come out of the blue. There's actually a history behind it. Both of them are wrong. Both of them are right.
sure.
Fuck that.
No, there's this philosopher or theologian I listen to every once in a while, Alan Watts, and he has this
Yes.
Buddhist approach, and it's kind of what you mentioned with kind of realizing we're all the same fabric of life, and it's all the same thing. It's why do you think then? I mean, you talk about living your life on a screen on the album, and there, I've actually I have a book about individualistic, the individualistic nature of our society these days. What role do you think music can play in trying to combat that?
Well, I'll give it to you in an exact, very simplistic way. It's the only element in life that you do not need language for, which drops every single barrier. The minute you can connect with music from my countryside and I can connect to music from your countryside, that's already unity. So and no need for messages in the words. The words are additional. Simply, it's just aesthetic and poetic and all that bullshit. It's the music. The minute you can feel that beat, and it all started in Africa with just a beat, you know, it's just ancestral and instinctive. You cannot fight it. You cannot fight music. It's the biggest invader of hearts that we know of. So it has a power to unify inevitably. You know, that's why whenever anyone mentions genres, it's like, man, just you put the genre that you want. It's music. It's music.
No, but I find it interesting what you say that it's kind of ancestral and instinctive. Is that kind of the way you make music then? Is that kind of you don't have any preconceived notion and you just start to put things together?
Yes, particularly that I'm not a real musician, to be honest. I'm like, I know what I know in terms of theory and chords and all and technically I'm not an excellent technician on any of the. I play 5, 6 instruments. I'm not good at any, which pushes me to actually create things that are on my size in an instinctive way. That doesn't involve a lot of thinking. It's in my subconscious. It's in the heart. That's the connection. I don't involve the frontal cortex, if you want, right, in anything I do.
But that's an interesting thing, because what I find interesting, for instance, on Fallen Angel, but also the end of Jericho, there's the layering of the music is really. I don't know if intricate is too much of a word, but you can hear all those layers and the synth lines, and then you have some, I think, traditional Middle Eastern instrument, like a little line through everything. Is that just whatever pops into your head? How do you figure out what to put in where?
It's actually, I think, a good 60% of what's in my head, and that's where I always sometimes feel like, fuck, man, I wish I could write music. Because that's what I could translate to collaborators. And now, instead of learning music, I've learned software. So now I produce my own stuff. So it gets me closer to what I hear in my head. When I hear it finished in my head. It's almost scary because I feel like I'm stealing it from somewhere. Like, is this a song somewhere that I'm actually stealing? Because it's finished, it's orchestrated, it's almost played. It's just a question of translating it to people I'm working with. And now with Ableton and Pro Tools and all these cats, I had to learn them during COVID, and I got relatively good at them. I can produce my own things and put my own ideas.
When did you know that you were making an album then? Because it was a while ago that you released, I think, your last EP. And as you mentioned, COVID is kind of this reflective period. When did you know that you were, whatever you were working on at the time, that it would end up on an album?
It wasn't. It was just songs back then. It was literally, I'm doing this one song, I'm doing this other song. But when they connected thematically, when I started writing lyrics, and I noticed that all the lyrics have this social aspect to them, this people directed, not too intimate, but also intimate at other times as well, but really reflective on a society level, especially on my society. And that brought Beirut into the whole. It gave it a narrative line.
Sure.
And that's when I was like, all right, I think we have a record, because I had 15, 20 songs. I say, all right, we can cut a record out of this and find a narrative line to them. Only Jericho is out of them.
Were you hesitant to write this, or I mean, not to write this? That's obviously you write just whatever you write. Were you hesitant to bring any of this out, to kind of put your perspective out into the world in that sense?
Well, I had the what do you call it? I think in psychology they call it the imposter syndrome for a while, especially when you're not that good of a musician. You're just an artist who creates things with whatever limitations they have. Um, and the success that we had on the first record and the EPs and all that, it felt fake for a second, especially when COVID hit. It's like, all right, when everything comes back, I don't think anyone will remember any of that. It wasn't real music. I mean, anyone can write two chords, anyone can put together these. But I noticed recently that no, not anyone can do what we do. And that what we do is actually necessary, and it makes me feel good, and that's what matters.
I think that
So
that's the most important thing, the connection that you kind of make through music, and then
it's a healing process for me to start with. And then if people connect with it, even better.
well, because that was kind of the question I had. I mean, do you live in Beirut now?
Yes.
So what is your feeling about the city these days then? Because as you mentioned, in the past couple of years, there have been quite some tragedies, and then I mean everything that's going on. But can you do you see kind of the city flourishing in any way, or is there any positive things that you can take out of the city?
Yeah. Always. This city is used to it. I mean,
Mm,
before modern history, this city was buried 8 times
mm.
into the sea, into the ground, and then it was hence the whole phoenix legend, like we rise from the ashes. But fuck that, we're tired. You know.
I can
Uh,
imagine.
yeah, and I'm part of the city's fabric. It means that I have a bar in the city. I own a bar.
Okay.
I'm a DJ as well. I play electronic music in the clubs. So I have my hand on the what do you call it, on the pulse of the city.
Mm.
I see it every day and every night when I go to the bar or to the clubs and I play. Um, there's always pulse in the city. Now it doesn't mean it's always healthy. Sometimes
Sure.
it's incredibly toxic. But for instance, last week I was in my own bar. I walk in there. We had, I don't know, 50 people in there. Most of them are on their phones,
Mm.
checking for the next Israeli strike. So it was sort of a communal depression in a sort, but at the same time, everyone is talking about it, so that is healthy in a way.
No, because I can imagine. I mean, I'm from the Netherlands, and we've had a pretty easy go over here, if we compare it to a lot of the world. So it's difficult for me to place myself in that. But there seems to be in these types of cities like Beirut, there seems to be a certain resilience. Is that fair to say?
Yes. It's not always a quality that's positive.
Mm,
Sometimes desperation creates action. Resilience creates cycles. Okay,
mm,
they'll kick me, I'll get back up. They'll kick me, they'll get back up. But if I'm desperate, maybe I'll do something that they won't kick me again.
mm.
So we have a Stockholm syndrome with the whole resilience
Right.
concept. Desperation sometimes creates action. Hope is a double-edged sword.
Oh yeah, of
You know.
course. With that in mind, then, because what do you hope an album like this can do? I don't know, how is your music perceived by people from Lebanon? Do you know?
Uh, yeah, I mean, I'm part of the minority here. We're not what the mainstream listens to.
Okay.
So that's for sure. We're in a minority, so I think that's the size that it will have here. If one of the songs crosses over into one of the mainstream radios, that'll be a lucky thing. But no, here it's just a place for big pop, big-breasted, big-lipped pop artists. Um, yeah, we're on the fringes of that. So technically, I'm a product for export.
Mm. So, and going back to the music, then what I find interesting is, like I said, I like the layering, but you also have that hypnotic quality that you talked about with R.L. Burnside, that repetition and kind of sitting in this loop, or sitting in this riff in a way. What do you hope people get out of those kind of things? I mean, there's so many interesting moments on the record, but what do you hope people get out of those moments?
Look, this is a two-sided, like two parts question. Yes, the repetitive patterns, I use them deliberately and consciously. Like this happens, I plan it, I do it, because it's sort of a mantra. I don't know if you meditate or any of our listeners are
I don't know,
meditate.
but I get the concept. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you need to just make sure that your brain is stuck on something repetitive so it doesn't think, or it doesn't think as much. It calms down while repeating one repetitive pattern. And that's what brought in electronic. That's why electronic music is so powerful these days, because it's just this one hook repeat in itself. So it keeps you away from the conscious thinking.
Right.
So yes, this is something that's deliberate, and it induces an outlook inwards and not outwards, because we think the world is happening outside. Most of it is happening inside. So these eyes, yes, they see on the outside. You need the other ones to look on the inside. And that's what I hope it gets people to do. If they think, I mean, if it makes them feel anything, I'm fine.
Do you start, because you mentioned the electronics, do you start with the electronics then? Because I can imagine a song like We Are One, which is kind of this electro banger. Do you start with that kind of go ahead.
I mean, this record in particular was made sort of on my own to start with, because we couldn't be together as a band. I couldn't be with any musician. I was with a laptop and a software that I was just learning. So it made it inevitably electronic key in terms of sounds. Like I was using the 808s, the 809s, all these old school machines for electro and hip hop back then. So that's where the electronic feel came from, because I was producing on my own. Otherwise, we would be sat in a garage and we would be repeating. We're in a rehearsal room, we would be repeating, and it would be an actual drum set. But once you have the drums being electronic, a normal bass doesn't sound as good with it. You know, like a jazz master or any of these, a Gretsch bass would not sound as good. You have to go into the synth world. Once you go into the synth world, you're like, okay, now I have the bass and drums being electronic key in a field. So can I keep the rest organic? I figured out that we actually can.
Well, that will be my question, because with this in mind, and when you are going to perform the songs live, is that now a more difficult transition?
It's a mess, my man. It's a mess. It's a mess that I'm trying to plan as much as possible, because I do want this electronic kick. I grew to like it in a rock context. I mean, look at the Kills. The Kills, they do it all the time.
Yeah, oh, definitely.
And a lot of
their latest record, very good. Yeah,
you know,
just good.
So yeah, so my drummer needs to learn how to play the SPD SX, this machine that could trigger these kicks, and then he'll follow it up with whatever on the top, or we're gonna get triggers on the drums, because once you solve the drum issue, the rest is fine. Then you have to sync the synthesizers with the SPD. It's very technical. I don't know if you're interested in the technique of it, but then we're gonna have to play on the click, so we're gonna have to be really correct.
That's going to be interesting. That have you performed any? Have you performed any of the new songs live yet? Okay.
No. I mean, now we're getting back at booking, but you know how it is. I mean, whenever live music came back, it was time for the big bands first. You know, the music of the world, and you know, the Queens of the Stone Ages. Now it's time for us. You know.
Yeah, fair enough. I have one last question then. Under the sun, when does a title like that pop up into your head?
It doesn't. It doesn't. It was just "We Are One." It started as "We Are One," and I simply had to find a rhyme for it. So what matters is we are one. That's the part that sticks. But maybe you should be. This is an anecdote. Since you're from the Netherlands, the song "Fallen Angel" was actually written in Amsterdam.
Okay.
Yeah, it was one of my musicians back then, a drummer, fell in love with a Vitrina lady in the Red Quarter. He fell in love with her. Like they exchanged numbers and they kept on writing to each other for a while.
Okay.
And that's where the song came. I'm falling for a fallen angel.
Oh, that's very interesting.
It was around the canals that it was written.
That's where does the, especially with Fallen Angel and Jericho, it does have that kind of I don't know, Western is too much, but that vibe, that cinematic vibe, a little bit Tarantino-esque. How does something like that then sneak into a song that was written in Amsterdam?
Wow, I don't know the link, but it was surfy. It was like it
Yeah.
surf. It was a mix between surf and Morricone, if there ever has been one. Done by a Lebanese guy on a canal in Amsterdam because his Algerian drummer fell in love with a lady who works at night. That's the world.
It doesn't get, yeah, with what we started this interview with. I mean, that's in a nutshell kind of the yeah, we're all one.
That's the world. Exactly.
All right, maybe that's a perfect way to end then. Nader, may I thank
Cheers,
you
my
so
man.
much for taking the time.
Thank you for being interested in talking to us, and I hope to see you when I hit the Netherlands, my man.